Paid for by Save Juneau, P.O. Box 32142 Juneau, Alaska 99803 Molly Duval Chair. Top contributors Wayne Coogan, James Wilcox and Robert Jacobson.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alex Sargent, and this is Did You Know Juneau? Today I have Alicia Hughes-Skandijs with me. Perfect. And she is
Huh?
running for a District 1 Assembly seat. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah. We're going to start off with getting to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what qualifies you to represent us on the Assembly.
All right. So I've been in Juneau for 19 years. I came up here to attend UAS is what originally brought me here. Um, Worked for all kinds of places after that, worked in service industry and tourism and nonprofit industry. And then I was a state worker for a while. And started getting involved with my union, was a steward, and started paying closer attention to local politics. Started engaging more directly as a citizen, testifying on stuff and tracking stuff. And then when our Senator Jesse Keel got elected, that created a spot. And so I put my name in the hat and I was appointed. And so ever since that time, then I ran for office after that a couple of times and was lucky and privileged enough to get elected. And I've been serving on the assembly for the last 4 years and change.
Oh, okay. Perfect. First question. Here we go. We all love living in Juneau, but it can be expensive. Save Juneau is very concerned about the cost of living. What is one idea the Assembly could implement to lower Juneau's cost of living?
Yeah, there's no question we live in one of the more expensive parts of the state. And I think right now with inflation, we are all experiencing that even more so. Because I know if I'm feeling it to the extent that I am, it makes me think about what it's like for a family
Yeah.
with a bunch of kids, which I don't have. I think the best things that the assembly can do to affect that are some of the things that we know that really hit that hard is like housing. Our housing costs are really expensive. So if the assembly can positively impact housing, which I have a couple of ideas of how we could do that. But if we increase the supply, that's going to bring costs down. If we increase the supply, that's going to kind of stop this crazy rise that we're seeing with our assessments, which helps with people's taxes. So that would be, I think, those sort of direct, basic living costs are one way for the assembly to affect that.
Awesome. All right. So at both the state and city level, as well as the private sector, there are tons of vacant and open positions in the workforce. Why can't Juneau attract more people to live and work here?
I think we just talked about housing. Where are they going to live? That is impacting so many employers. A hospital hires
Yeah.
somebody,
Yeah.
they retract their acceptance of that offer because they checked it out, couldn't find a place that suited their, lifestyle and their family needs, looked at the cost of relocation. That's out. We have our cruise ship tourism sector trying to find workers. Some of them come from out of state. Where are they going to live? So that's part of it. The other thing is childcare costs here are super expensive and it's hard to find a piece, I was about to say a piece of spot, but it's hard to find an opening for your child. So I think one thing that happened during COVID with people working from home, when a two-parent family where you have two workers, it's not ideal, but people realized that they were paying most of their wages just to the cost of childcare. So maybe you don't re-enter the labor market. So you might be sensing a theme, but housing
Yeah.
and childcare they affect us in so many ways. So I think that's a large part of our labor market. And, nationally, things have been written about how else did COVID affect people's desires and what they wanted. But I think those are two big ones.
Yeah. Yeah. I I I agree in my personal opinion, oh my goodness, I say all the time, I was a victim. No victim mentality, but I was a victim. So I totally hear you in what
Yeah.
you're saying there. Um, so you've been on the assembly, so we're actually gonna pump into kind of the roles of assembly. How do you see the roles of the assembly member and city manager, which is hired by the assembly?
I think, well, so we have for anyone who doesn't know, we have a strong manager form of government here in Juneau.
Yeah.
So pros to that, you have a kind of stability, which I favor, I think is good. The city manager takes his direction from the assembly.
Yeah.
And I said his, but it'll be hers.
Right, right.
Excited about our new city manager.
Yeah.
But I think the kind of role of the assembly is put in there by hopefully an engaged electorate they want that assembly to be shaping the community based on the people that they put in there. So then the assembly acts as kind of I don't want to say a guard, but it's an accountability factor, and gives the city manager that direction, go forth and accomplish. On the day to day, when I talk about the stability, the nice thing about having a empowered city manager is that you don't have every 3 years this path where one assembly says, go do this, and then you have turnover and the assembly says, don't do that, go do this. And I think we see a little bit of that with Anchorage. They have a strong mayor. It can cause some havoc. So I prefer an assembly that's doing its job and keeping that accountability with the city manager, setting that approach, but the day-to-day business is kind of handled by the city manager.
Okay, we're going to actually continue on the role of an assembly member. How would your decisions be affected by public opinion, testimony in person or email versus your knowledge and judgment you've gained on issues?
I think that's a really good question. I think it's important that is a braided approach or like a blended approach, because I talked about the city manager being accountable to the assembly. So the assembly is then accountable to the electorate. So to a certain extent, if you are not responsive to the needs of, and maybe to a full extent, but if you're not responsive to your community, then the ultimate sort of what's the word? I've been saying accountability over and over. Then you're gonna be unelected. Someone else is gonna be put in there, right? Like that's the ultimate thing. But there are times when, for instance, we've gotten some feedback and pushback from the community where you might have 6 people come and testify, and they all say, do this thing or don't do this thing. So let's say they say, do this thing, and then you don't do that thing. That can appear very unaccountable to that testimony, but it's hard. It's important, I think, for an assembly member. You're holding the needs of the entire community. You're looking at, with the knowledge and the work that you've put in, all the homework and the detail, you're thinking, what is the best decision for the entire community? Because we know that your testimony is going to be from those most directly affected. So it's important that you weigh that into the decision, but at the same time, there's a little bit of a balancing act. And that's that piece of, you're elected to make the decisions. That's why it's important people are engaged during the election process, because you're putting forth your vision, and then they can decide, do they like it or do they not, like somebody else's.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So we have to talk about the one ballot measure, or I call it the bond measure. So we're going to ask it.
Okay.
Do you support public servants promoting the city hall with public money? Do you have alternate options to solve the public building we have today?
Say that again. Alternate options for?
To solve the public building we have today.
Oh, rather than building a new city hall. Gotcha. Well, so I voted to put it on the ballot, and I also voted to do the $50,000 appropriation. So, and I will say, just for the heck of it, I'm one of the only people who I voted to do the $50,000 last year. I was just in the minority, and the rest of the folks were convinced.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed talking with people about this because I 100% I voted to not we had the same decision before us when the realtors wanted to, not just them, but to repeal that disclosure. So to me, that was a clear cut. You don't use people's money to advocate against that. They gathered enough signatures. So that's an example where I would say that's a no-go.
Yeah. Based
on the legal advice that we received from the city lawyer, this $50,000 appropriation is not really trying to, I've seen people say re-educate or with their own resources. I don't view it that way.
Okay.
It's what we legally have to do in order to do something like a public explainer, or like, because people said, why not just put out a press release with the facts? Well, our lawyer is telling us we can't do that unless we do this $50,000 thing. So, I mean, you could say, I'm going to risk it. I don't agree with him. And, but following that advice, it's not like we're spending 50 extra. We're just tracking the salary and time spent by staff on doing things like explainers and going to Rotary meetings or going to chamber meetings. And so, but I will be voting yes. And I am voting yes because I think the alternative is going to be a waste of public money.
So we're actually going to pop into property taxes.
Okay.
And you talked about housing earlier, so now we'll shuffle on back to it. Full circle. So some 400 owners appealed their property assessments this year. Talk to us about property taxes and on that.
I'm not sure what you were just talking, or I don't want to, I might be talking about something different than you're talking about, but we had a record high of, we have different exemptions. So like for senior hardship, veterans, some of those were much higher than they've ever been.
Exactly.
And those were for the late filed. So those are people who are not. So we said, we asked staff to say, why is this so different than all the other years?
Okay.
I would say lack of supply, obviously drives up the assessments because, as somebody who is looking at houses, that also drives up the prices. I think what is not always known is that the assessor's office, like I've had some good ideas posed and I've seen them done in other states where you could, people say, why not do an ordinance that's going to limit, or like it can't go, my assessment can't go up more than inflation or, escalator factors.
Right. Like
that's something. And that's something that is in place in other states. Legally for us, we can't do something like that because of a state law. So that's out of our hands. I think it's important then you set the mill rate, taking that to account, but you also have to take into account whatever you voted to put in the budget. So for me, the end of the day, the budget has to balance.
Right.
We did cut the mill rate because, assessments being so high and the projection being what it was. But there's no doubt. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, I think people are feeling the pain right now.
I call this the ambiguous question, but gotta ask it.
Okay.
If you could make a promise to voters that you swear not to break, what would it be? I
mean, one thing that I'd make a lot of promises.
That's what,
because I take it pretty seriously.
Right.
But I guess that in kind of trying to encapsulate to voters, I promise I do not approach a single meeting or a single decision without a level of seriousness. It's a heavy charge. So I take every decision we make seriously and consider how it will affect residents. My promise would be that I approach every decision with an understanding of how heavy a charge it is and how to consider how it affects residents.
Is there any final statements that you would like to provide us?
I would just say, I've been on the assembly now for, like I said, 4+ years. I really consider it a privilege. I think my experience positions me puts me in a good place to make some progress on some of the things we talked about, some of the goals that I have. And proud of the work I've done and would be lucky to have someone's vote. Awesome.
Thank you. I just want to send out a reminder to all voters out there. Ballots go out the 14th. They're going to be mailed out, so they'll probably hit your mailbox around the 16th. But either way, don't miss it. Don't forget it. Don't throw it in the trash. Get out there, fill it out, and get it in the mailbox. Some people really like to certify. Also, if you want to walk in to the in-person places in your district, you can also do that. So lots of options out there to get engaged and be amazing citizens of Juneau. And it has been awesome talking to you, Alicia. Thank you so much for talking with us. This was awesome.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the conversation. And vote. Let's get those participation rates way up.
Yeah, awesome. All right. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Take care.